The initial thoughts about having the Cleveland Orchestra perform on a regular basis in Miami, or in fact in Florida, began in 2004, which was, as everybody knows, the American economy and certainly the Cleveland economy were still in some level of doldrums after the downturn of 2000, 2001. And the Cleveland Orchestra in particular was looking for ways to stabilize its finances. It had had a few years of deficits at that point. The first year of a meaningful deficit was in fiscal 2001. There were a number of ideas that were floated at the time. One was that we could tour throughout the state of Florida at least annually. And that was originated from Cleveland Orchestra management, and that was based on the fact that our Florida touring was the only touring in the previous 10 or so years where we had earned a positive margin to support fixed costs. Another idea that was floated at about that time came from a member of our board, Daniel Lewis, who was and remains a resident of Miami, Florida. And Dan floated a question that was probably intended mostly to be provocative rather than practical. His question was, do arts organizations move the way sports teams move? Is there any scenario under which the Cleveland Orchestra could relocate from Cleveland to Miami? The answer to that question is generally no. And the answer to the question about touring in Florida was not really a practical one either. However, from those two seeds, the residency grew. The other significant thing that was going on at the time was that the Performing Arts Center, that's currently called the Arts Center for the Performing Arts, was under construction in Miami. It had been under construction for a long time. It was a project of Miami-Dade County. And it did not have a resident orchestra. So the leadership of the Performing Arts Center project and management of the Cleveland Orchestra began to craft a way in which the Cleveland Orchestra could be a regular resident of the Performing Arts Center. That all took place more or less in 2004 and early 2005. The details had to be fleshed out from there, and well, initially it wasn't quite determined how this would be managed and governed. By the end of 2006, we knew that the Cleveland Orchestra itself would form its own organization in Miami, governed by a Miami-based board, and would take the risk of presentation at the Arts Center, would have its own fundraising organization, and would be responsible for the marketing of the concerts. The residency launched in January of 2007, and the coming season, the 2015-16 Miami residency season, is our 10th season at the Arts Center in Miami. When we initially created the organization in Miami, it was a 501c3 supporting organization. In other words, its charter and its tax-exempt status flowed from the 501c3 charter of the Musical Arts Association, which is the governing organization of the Cleveland Orchestra in Cleveland, also Severance Hall, and our summer home Blossom Music Center. So initially, it was a supporting organization, a charitable organization, which was dedicated to the support of the Cleveland Orchestra. Subsequently, the Miami organization became an independent 501c3, a true Miami organization, and that was accomplished about 3 years ago with a change in its tax status and some changes in its governing documents, so that we now have a separate organization in Cleveland from the organization in Miami, and the two organizations have a formal operating agreement which describes how we jointly oversee the program, which goes by the name of Cleveland Orchestra Miami. Now, the Cleveland Orchestra is an organization that's almost 100 years old. It has a wonderful history and a wonderful tradition, all based around excellence in the programming and performance of orchestral music. And as such, and since the orchestral repertoire is only changing very slowly, as we all know, institutions like the Cleveland Orchestra tend to change only very slowly, unless they're in trouble. In the first part of the new millennium, the Cleveland Orchestra was in some measure of financial difficulty, and we needed to look at ways of expanding our markets. And we did that in two ways. We expanded our markets locally by diversifying our programming locally, and we expanded our markets geographically by expanding our footprint, not just in America, but also in the world. Since we're talking specifically about the Miami initiative, that particular initiative initially was 3 weeks of our annual schedule. It's currently 4 weeks of our annual schedule. And taking 3 weeks of the orchestra schedule and devoting those 3 weeks to an entirely new market, South Florida, served to expand our market potential for ticket sales, for partnerships, educational activities, and for philanthropy. There's nothing particularly creative about a geographic market expansion, but like anything, like any creative pursuit, creativity is one thing, but the hard work of execution, in my opinion, ultimately makes the difference. And so our approach to Miami has been to be relentlessly focused on providing value to the Miami community and relentlessly focused on developing a constituency in Miami that really feels ownership of Cleveland Orchestra Miami and recognizes the value that the Cleveland Orchestra can bring to the Miami community. So if you're running a symphony orchestra, you consider the question of return on investment always in the back of your mind, but the measurement of the success of a symphony orchestra is not a financial ROI. The measurement of success is on the delivery of service to communities. It's on the consistent achievement of artistic excellence. It's on advancing the art form. And in all three of these areas, our Miami initiative has provided a significant return, not just to the institution, but also to the community. Now, you can't deliver service and you can't add value to communities if you are financially unstable. And so we have to manage the Miami initiative in a way which is at least as stable as our activities in Cleveland and our activities in Europe, for that matter. And so we pay very close attention to the revenue from ticket sales. In Miami, we pay close attention to the revenue from performances that we give outside of Miami, for example, in Palm Beach or Naples, or even in Sarasota, Fort Myers area. And we pay particular attention to the sponsorship and the philanthropy that the community offers up in order to sustain Cleveland Orchestra Miami. All of those things have yielded outcomes which are generally positive. There's a positive margin to help support fixed costs. In every area of our business, the positive margin does not fully support the fixed costs, but we do have an endowment which helps to balance the budget at the end of every year.